Oh no! What have they done? Why are we here? Just to suffer. Gamers, we got problems. Our very way of life is at risk. We live in a world where video games now cost the price of a mortgage on a small home, and video game companies are even considering putting paid ads in games we already paid money to play. Paid adverts in games that we already paid money to play. Fuck you, EA. Just fuck you. In a world where game developers are asking for $70 of our hard-earned money, and a lot more than that for early access and special editions, but are then giving us unfinished, buggy, broken games on release, it feels like a real kick in the stick. Come back here, I paid for you! It feels like AAA studios no longer have any respect left for their consumers. Not that they had much to begin with. Newsflash for you game devs, you wouldn't have a career, let alone a studio, without the very gamers you keep taking advantage of. This is why more and more gamers are flocking to sites like Itch.io and Kickstarter, because developers on those sites are making games they're passionate about, and are offering great prices and great rewards in exchange for a game you actually really want to play. And if I think back to some of my favourite games of the last few years, most of them are indie titles, like Stardew Valley, possibly one of the most famous, successful indie games ever made, and was literally created to challenge AAA companies because Eric Barone believed that Harvest Moon had swayed too far from its original, passionate vision. I also think about Subnautica, Lethal Company, Undertale, Minecraft, indie games that have outsold thousands of soulless AAA games. I've been thinking about video game prices for a long time now, but as soon as Nintendo announced the price of the Switch 2 and their decision to charge nearly $100 for physical copies of their games, despite being one of the most successful video game companies of all time, well, I felt like I just had to talk about the issue. But there's one thing in particular that I do really want to talk about, somewhat unrelated to this Nintendo bullshittery. Why do all games cost the same? Okay, I know that's a blanket statement and isn't technically true, but for instance, you have an indie game like Helldivers 2, which on release costs $40, and that game is technically endless. And it's beautifully put together and is the perfect action game with plenty of comedy sprinkled throughout, all the while making you feel totally epic. It's also multiplayer, allowing for all sorts of hilarious and random events to occur as you fight for democracy in a never-ending war. And then you have a game like Phasmophobia, a game made by 2 developers, currently priced brand new for $20, and again, is technically endless and still receives updates to this day. Phasmophobia is another great example of a very fun and funny multiplayer game that has managed to make me poop in my own pants more times than I can count. And again, you have Stardew Valley, a game that I'm pretty sure on release costs just $15 and is technically endless. And over in AAA land, you have Star Wars Outlaws and the Dead Space remake. Now, Star Wars is roughly 40 hours minimum, while Dead Space is a roughly 6 to 10 hour experience depending on how you play, but both of these games brand new cost $70. And then there's Monster Hunter Wilds, an open world, technically endless experience, $70. The Last of Us, a 10 to 12 hour experience, $70. Do you see it? Do you see what I'm getting at? It seems the industry has a price. Like a set price. We made a game, therefore it must cost $70. But why? Indie developers charge what they feel their game is worth, and it doesn't stop them from being successful. Stardew Valley has made its creator at least $100 million. That's insane. And in the process, Eric Barone has developed a crazy loyal and loving fan base, which is more than can be said for EA, BioWare, Nintendo, Ubisoft, and 2K, so basically every AAA studio out there. So how do we determine how much is too much for a game? Is it based on length or quality? Technically, a game that lasts forever or has a higher replay value is more worthy of your paycheck. But if that game doesn't resonate with you as strongly as an experience that lasts roughly 6 hours or so, should it be worth less? I don't really have a solid answer, because I quite like the Itch.io or Kickstarter method, where you donate or back a game based on what you think it's worth, and in Kickstarter's case, also what rewards are offered to you for that price. Now, obviously at the end of the day, what is and isn't worth $70 or more of your hard-earned money is going to depend entirely on you. Some games find us at very special times in our lives and we'd be willing to sell our souls and luscious bodies just to play them. There are definitely a few games in my life that I would pay, and have paid an absurd amount of money just to play. The Last of Us, which I've owned on PS3, PS4 and PS5, and The Witcher 3, which I own on PlayStation, Steam and GOG. Don't ask me why, it's none of your business. And the Mass Effect trilogy, which I've owned on Xbox 360, PC, disc copy, Steam and PS4, so yes, I would say those games are worth the asking price, because at different points in my life, they all meant a great deal to me. The Last of Us was possibly the first real story-driven game I'd ever played, and so I was completely caught off guard by how cinematic and believable the world felt. Also, for a gamer who'd spent his life playing giant open world games, chasing the adrenaline of exploring a world and going on a massive adventure, no game even came close to making me feel like I'd gone on an adventure like The Last of Us. Even though this game is as restrictive as they come, with you often walking down literal corridor-esque levels, I still felt like I'd crossed the entire United States. It was so immersive and exciting and scary that I started my second playthrough just days after I completed it. And believe me, that's not something I do often with games. And it's been a game that has genuinely really stuck with me all this time. But until you've played the game, how could you know if it's worth the asking price? It's only through retrospective, nostalgic memories that I'm able to say it's worth the $70. And I might get some hate for this, but I dropped $70 on the Silent Hill 2 remake, and by the time I finished the game, I felt like I'd played through a $20 indie game. I just didn't think there was enough content to justify the asking price. Recycled enemies, repetitive combat, and sure, the graphics are pretty, but the level design is ancient and bland. And yes, I know it's a remake of an older game, but it's still a remake, not a remaster. So I think they could have modernized it further beyond just changing the camera angle. In this case, I would rather have saved my money towards Monster Hunter Wilds, seeing as I was such a big fan of Monster Hunter World, clocking in at just under 100 hours before I felt finished with the game. And just so no one can twist my words, I'm not saying bigger games should cost more. Quite the opposite, in fact. I think $70 is the absolute maximum games should ever be, and even that is still quite expensive. But perhaps there should at least be some sort of system in place for pricing shorter games, regardless of their quality. Because you can argue that the quality of a game like The Last of Us, with its next-gen graphics and animations, is worth a lot of money because a lot of time went into making it, and you'd be absolutely right. But shouldn't quality just be a given? If you're going to make anything to sell to another person, shouldn't that thing work as intended in the first place? I feel like quality should just be a baseline in this industry, and yes, Bethesda, I'm looking at you. My solution to this problem is to have categories for games, like genres. If your game is a multiplayer shooter like Call of Duty, which is technically endless and actually comes with a ton of different game modes as well as a campaign, then the $70 price tag is perfect and feels fair. Shorter story-driven games that fall within the 10 to 20 hour range should cost around $30 to $40, and for games like The Witcher 3 and Skyrim, which are packed with story content and side quests but do technically eventually come to an end, you could charge around $50 to $55. I don't know why indie games feel the need to be shy and polite when it comes to pricing their games, when AAA studios with excess billions hoarded away for later feel the need to charge such excessive amounts for their games. It's just so unfair, man! So what do you think about the current state of this precious industry? Do you agree with anything I said? Have I opened your eyes to the truth? Feel free to let me know in the comments. Let's get a discussion started. And if you like my take on video games and the industry as a whole, why not consider checking out one of my other videos where I review / analyze games in a fun, lighthearted way, and maybe even consider subscribing. But genuinely, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.